Hey, it's Webs here, and it's time to embrace the demonic nature of Fel magic with Fel Warlock. The idea behind this deck is to scale your Fel damaging spells, such as Demonic Assault or Felfire in the hole, with your spell damage in the deck, such as Guild Trader and Blood Mage. I mainly mentioned Felfire in the hole by name just because of the fact that every spell damage that you have actually increases the damage of this by 2, just because you're running only Fel spells in the deck. You also rely on Pandorian Importer and Venomous Scorpid as ways to generate shadow spells for this deck, so you have other ways to actually survive until you can actually pull off your big combo. And you also have Spice Breadbaker as your only way to actually heal within the deck, as all other Warlock spells that heal are all shadow, so you can't actually run it in this style of deck. And you can also use the Grave Defilers to either copy your Full-Blown Evil or your Felfire in the hole or the Demonic Assault. Those are always good targets. Deck in turn actually plays more like a control deck than a aggro-based deck, so be wary of long games. The Mulligan guide of this deck is a little bit more complex than most decks that I've actually put out in the past. Grave Defiler is a great card to keep in your opening hand if you have either Full-Blown Evil or Felfire in the hole or Demonic Assault in your hand, just so you can get an early additional copy of one of those 3 spells, as those are the 3 ways that you're going to actually win the game. Otherwise, Tour Guide is probably your best bet for a turn 1 play, followed by Unstable Felbolt. But for Unstable Felbolt, it depends if you're against a bunch of minions or if you're not. The same thing can be said about Full-Blown Evil, as this card is only useful in minion-based matchups, though it is generally a good card to keep in your opening hand if it is that. Otherwise, you're looking to keep cards like Pandorian Importer or Venomous Scorpid in your opening hand, as these cards will allow you to actually generate some answers that you normally couldn't run in the deck, such as a AoE board clear or some survivability, and a very chaotic choice that you can choose from both Venomous Scorpid and Pandorian Importer. Deck of Chaos, which is actually really good for this deck to be able to randomly generate, as there's only one real bad target for Deck of Chaos in the entire deck, which is the Grave Defilers. Everything else you can discount the cost of your minions by so much that is actually pretty good choice for a random generation off of Pandorian Importer or Venomous Scorpid. And finally, the last card you might want to keep in your opening hand is Ruined Mythril Rod. This really depends on if you know the matchup isn't going to do enough damage where you can actually have one less card in your hand until you can actually play Ruined Mythril Rod on turn 5 or 4, depending if you have the coin or not. With that being said, let's go find some games. Alright, time for a game against Druid. Okay, so this opening hand isn't the worst for this deck, actually. We could just keep everything here, but we're just going to get rid of the Scorpid because Druid tends to be a slower class, so I should be safe by doing that. Blood Mage is not a top deck that we wanted to see, though. Drawing back into the Scorpid is kind of frustrating, but oh well. Okay, that is definitely not another top deck that we wanted to see. We're just going to Hero Power. We also kind of had the opportunity to just place down the Panther just to put some pressure on board, but oh well. So here we can play a Scorpid, especially because we don't have any targets for Defiler right now. Deck of Chaos is really great to actually pick up right here, because we haven't drawn into our Fel Walkers yet, and it'll make it cost 3 instead of 6, which is actually a pretty big power play when you can actually get that for 3 mana instead of 6. We're going to use our Hero Power. Now we actually do have a target for the Grave Defilers that we have both copies of, but I'd rather be a little bit greedy with a Felfire in the hole. Lobotomizer is not something I expected. I get Thief Rogue is floating around a lot right now because of the newfound synergy between Edwin and bouncing him back, but I honestly didn't expect to see Lobotomizer as a card anyone would include in a deck like that. I'm also kind of shocked it's just Thief Rogue and not Ramp Druid. Okay, so they're going to bounce a bunch of things back and then play a bunch of minions. What Thief Rogue does in a nutshell. Going to play the Rod down. We do have quite a few ways to actually have additional draws the Rod, so playing it as early as possible is pretty good, especially because the chances of them actually running a Viper Ooze to actually destroy their weapon is pretty low. We have a few choices. We could use Full Blown Evil or Deck of Chaos. But Deck of Chaos is probably the better solution here, and then we can just trade in our Guild Trader, getting a Spice Bread Baker, which is actually pretty good, just because we're going to get low here, and we do want some healing. And that is not something we wanted to see. Felfire in the hole is exactly what we want to see, though. Though too bad that Full Blown Evil is technically still in our hand, because we're generating a second copy of that instead of Felfire in the hole. That was actually probably the worst thing that we could have generated an additional copy of. We're going to get a bunch of discount here, which is good. Drawing into the Guild Trader to get discounted is actually really good. Going to play the Mini Mage, see what we generate off of this Scorpid. Taking the Felfire in the hole because there's no reason not to. And then we're going to try to use Demonic Assault on their face, which is counterspelled, which is what I assumed that was probably going to be. And now we have a 66% chance of getting another Felfire, which we do. And then we can just trade in the Guild Trader again and get our fourth Felfire in the hole. That's perfectly fine. If I had to choose between the two minions in hand for that to do that too, that is definitely the one. Okay, so that's probably plagiarism, though I'm pretty sure I just play into it without thinking much. I have a bad track history when it comes to facing rogues and forgetting plagiarism is a card. There's our Fel Walker. And if we played the Fel Walker here, they would only get a copy of Fel Walker, but I was dumb and did not do that. So they're going to get one copy of Fel Walker and one copy of Felfire in the hole. See, there's definitely ways to play around in this deck. Sometimes my brain turns off and then I hard focus on doing whatever I wanted to do. Okay, so they're going to board clear here. Fine, to be honest, as long as our Fel Walker stays alive, we should have enough damage to get their face in our hand. There's the tour guide. Alright, so we're going to go face. We're going to play a tour guide, hero power, get Fel Seeds. Use one Felfire here, and then use Dreadlich, because we'll still have one Felfire in our hand and ways to actually scale it. We just need to draw into the Guild Traders here. The second Fel Walker, a Fel Rift, which isn't terrible, another Fel Rift, and a Pandaren Importer and burning the Demonic Assault, which is fine. We didn't technically need it, but it would have helped. Okay, so they're going to get Incanter's Flow and Felfire, and two big minions, but it shouldn't really matter because they only have 5 HP. And we win. Alright, time for a Warlock match. Now, this could probably be 8,000 different types of questline Warlock. That's what I'm assuming everything is going to be, or Owl Warlock, depending on how big the nerfs actually hit Owl Warlock. Just going to pass the turn, going to be greedy with our Grave Defiler. I do find it kind of funny that Grave Defiler has like shadow artwork in her portrait, but for some reason it supports Fel magic instead. Now we have a 50-50 shot of getting a good Grave Defiler here, and we did. Because if I have to choose between any spells to actually duplicate here, it's always going to be Felfire in the hole. And they are questline. I'm assuming they're either zoo or hand, depending on what we see besides just that one card that they just played down. Our hand isn't looking terrible. Well, let's just play a Demonic Assault. They're going to have to attack into our minions. Okay, so Drain Soul still doesn't give me an image of what version of questline they are right now. A Spice Bread Baker. We're just going to play a Rune Myth or Rod since we have both in hand. Okay, Cult Neophyte doesn't really do anything. Altar of Fire is not something I wanted to see. They burned their Battleground Battlemaster. So they're probably hand Warlock, if I'd assume. Here I'm considering a few different things. Going to go with the Dreadlord just because of the fact that if they have another Altar of Fire, I do not want to mill some of the cards that I actually need. And this will get rid of their 2 minions, so no big deal. There's our third Felfire in the hole. Now we get to discount the cards in our hand. Though we are going to burn something here. But most of the cards we want in our hand are actually in the hand, so that shouldn't matter too much. Okay, so there's a Goldshire Knoll. We burn the Grave Defiler, which is actually kind of sad. Gonna play the Fel Walker. Get one Felfire out of our hand, get a bunch of minions on board, play down the Scorpid, grab the Touch of the Nathrizim, though that is a card that I wish I had one more mana for, so I could have actually played it this turn, but oh well. And their own Dreadfire Lich. And I'm just going to mispronounce a bunch of cards this game, I guess. Though I think that's a little bit too early for when they want to do, just because of the fact they no longer have the static damage that they could get rid of or to trigger their quest line. I'm gonna play the second rod, use the touch, see what we generate off of this. Grabbing the demonic assault, playing importer, and Tasman's Phylactery would have been great if I was playing a different version of this deck. Okay, so there's Drained Soul, getting rid of our Scorpion. Okay, so that board is a little bit annoying to deal with, but we do have full-blown evil in our hand, so we should be fine. So that is another minion that we would have to deal with if we get that. We're going to see what we draw off of this, getting a second full-blown evil. Going to use the first one. And whatever one survives, we can just attack into. So they are going to burn more of our cards. I'm curious of why they're actually running that in their deck. I'm assuming it is to get to fatigue quicker, but if you don't trigger your questline, getting to fatigue quicker isn't good. Especially if you keep burning the cards that you need to get to complete your quest line. Okay, we have a 1-drop Guild Trader and a 1-drop Blood Mage, and 2-drop Felfire in the holes, which will board clear their entire board and do 18 damage, I think. But we can just keep one for later just in case they put down more minions. I'm gonna trade that in, getting our last Guild Trader, which is just what we actually needed. Gonna shuffle more Fel spells in the deck just because I don't want to accidentally draw it into the stupid Shadow Imp spawning spell off of Felfire in the hole, I mean. Okay, so they're going to take a bunch of damage from fatigue from this point forward. I don't think they're actually that close to completing their quest line either. They're going to kill one of our spell damage, which is bad. But we did play a little bit safe when we kept that last Felfire in the hand, just because I had a feeling they could make a big push turn like this at least one more time. Going to play down the Guild Trader. Use the Felfire in the hole. Then Demonic Assault, and just go face. And then we can also just kill the Flesh Giant real easily too. And there should be nothing they can actually do here. We do still have minions in our hands, so we can still technically win the War of Attrition. Oh, it sucks that they're 2 damage off of being able to complete their quest line. And we just get to win here. But first, let's destroy their entire team. Alright, time for a game against Paladin. This starting hand isn't terrible, to say. I'm going to get rid of the Guild Trader, getting a Demonic Assault, which is actually probably a worse thing to get here. Getting the Felfire as a top deck isn't technically something that we want to see, but at the same time, it isn't that bad just because it makes any grave defilers that we draw into really good. Okay, so there may be Secret Paladin. I'll just going to put down the Importer. Grabbing the Drain Soul just because we want some way to heal ourselves in case it is some type of more aggro-based Paladin deck. Just going to slam down the Scorpid. Grabbing the Dark Portal just because the other one will shuffle shadow spells in our deck, and that is not something we want to actually see. Okay, so there's Secret Libram Paladin, I'm assuming. We're going to want to try to trigger the Oh My Yogg if it is one. But I honestly forgot about Oh My Yogg when I was playing this game. Spring the Trap actually serves a better purpose than Dark Portal in this case, though. Okay, Grave Defiler. You could have played the Grave Defiler and a Unstable there, but getting the weapon out as much early as possible is always the best play, usually, if you're in a board state where you're still ahead. Alright, so what are the chances of a second Oh My Yogg? We're going to trigger it through that and then just play the Grave Defiler, because now we only have really good targets for Grave Defiler in our hand. And that doesn't actually do anything for us, so that's alright. Grabbing a second Felfire in the hole. Gonna grab the Imp Swarm. So they have Galloping Savior. A third Felfire. That's actually kind of funny. Okay, so they're just going to draw more holy spells. Probably buff up the Savior as much as humanly possible. Or maybe even the Samuro that they're going to place down. It's a kind of... Oh, I guess it makes sense why you'd attack that instead. Going to play a Tour Guide. Discount our entire hand here. Going to play the Demonic Assault. And the Drain Soul. Shuffle 5 Fel Rifts in the deck. Or 4, I mean. And then summon 2 more Imps. We're actually quite ahead here. Even if we don't have that many cards in our hand. We do have 3 cards that we do want to discount as much as humanly possible. Though we might need to start using some of them here. Another Tour Guide. Let's play the Tour Guide, see what we draw into. Importer, which is a perfect top deck. I'm gonna grab Touch, and then attack into the 5/7. Use Felfire in the hole, drawing a Seed of Destruction, and then do 3 damage to their face. Okay, so Reckoning. That's something that we normally just don't have to worry about, so it's good to see that's gone. Man, I wonder how old this version of Libram Paladin that they're using is. Okay, what will we draw here? A Fel Walker, interesting. We're gonna Hero Power, getting a Fel Rift. Another Grave Defiler, so we can actually duplicate anything in our hand. Please be the Felfire in the hole, and it is. And it actually uses the Felfire that we just created too. And that is the perfect card that we needed for next turn. Then we're just going to shuffle more Fel Rifts into the deck. I swear, with the amount of Fel support that they actually gave Warlock this set, they need to just print some big payoff in the mini set. Okay, Blood Mage. But we're going to use our AoE, tap ourselves a little bit, draw another card here, and draw another card. Sure wish we had a Rod right about now. We sadly don't. They're actually surprisingly low, so unless they have another Libram of Hope, we might be able to kill them in the next turn. Right, that weapon. I almost forgot about the weapon. Okay, so let's just tap here. Now that's a card that actually is pretty useful if we didn't have a full board currently. Just gonna nuke them as much as possible and then go for face. because each Felfire right now represents 5 damage apiece. So as long as one minion survives, we're perfectly fine if they don't have ways to actually heal them up that much. So they're going to kill all our board. But if they stay at 8 HP, we're good to go, actually. And that's a really funny top deck. And now we can just do all the damage in the world that we want. Alright, now that we're through the games, let's discuss my final thoughts of the deck and why I built the deck the way I did. So this deck actually went through 2 iterations. One where I used Rustsworn Initiate as a way to scale spell damage through Tasman's Phylactery, but that hurt the consistency factor of Felfire in the whole, because for some reason, even if I was running only one shadow spell in the entire deck, I would always draw it off of Felfire in the whole. It also did have some other problems. You always were relying on Pandaren Importer or Venomous Scorpid as ways to actually deal with your Tasman's Phylactery, but it also did have some other problems, which is why I moved on from that version of the deck. And this version felt a lot more consistent and actually won a lot more games by just relying on the 2 guild traders in the deck and the Blood Mage, as that actually serves, I think, about the same amount of spell damage that you could have gotten off of the Sworn Initiates. Though this does bring up the point of why I built the deck the way I did. I wanted to scale Felfire in the whole as much as humanly possible, and because of this, I needed to run some spell damage in the deck. And this definitely does demonstrate the greatest flaw of the deck. Felfire in the whole is your biggest payoff that you have for a Fel-based Warlock deck as it currently stands, and sure, it scales incredibly well with spell damage. There just isn't enough good spell damage minions in current Hearthstone standard for it to actually probably be a tier 1 deck. I do think this deck is probably close to a tier 2 deck just because it is pretty consistent on what it does, but it needs either a bigger payoff than Felfire in the whole in a form of either some type of legendary that scales off of how many Fel spells that you actually play in a game, or some type of cheap spell damage minion that is better than both Blood Mage and Guild Trader, as those are your best 2 spell damage minions to actually include in a deck like this as it currently stands. However, with that being said, I am very hopeful for the future of this deck. It has a lot of potential, and a lot of the cards aren't going to rotate out anytime soon, so you're always going to be able to have a base skeleton like this. And given the fact that most of the other cards for Warlock actually supported a Death Rattle Warlock deck, and we do have a mini set coming out for this set, I would assume that one of the new cards in that mini set will also support this deck, as Blizzard does try to support one of the lesser impacted themes in their mini sets whenever they come out. And I think the reason why they made Felfire in the whole the way they did, along with Fel Walker, is because they're too afraid that maybe a future card might break this. Though until then, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, bye bye.